Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our next channel. My name is Steady90 and today we're going to be reacting to Shaka Zulu vs Julius Caesar, Epic Rap Battle of History. I've done Epic Rap Battle of History on my channel before. Everybody knows Epic Rap Battles. I've watched this video before. I've sung along to this video before. I know this video. So I'm not even going to pretend that I haven't seen it. Go subscribe, go like, everything else like that. They deserve all the love and happiness and everything else like that in the world. They create great content. They deserve everything. Now, I know a decent amount about Julius Caesar, and I know a little about Shaka Zulu. I know a little bit about the Zulu Wars. I know the reason that they did so well was mostly because of British incompetence, not because Shaka was some amazing general. He actually used pretty primitive techniques, like the horn technique and reserves. That's something that's been used in more advanced civilizations for thousands of years. So he's not, for his area, he was a military genius, but he wasn't really a military genius. So there are points in this video where it's like, oh, we'll break you with the horns of, we'll break your legions with the horns of our warriors or whatever. The Romans would crush them, especially under Julius Caesar. The Zulus would get utterly crushed by Julius Caesar. It wouldn't be nowhere near a fair fight. The only reason Shaka Zulu did so well was, from my understanding, because he was actually using tactics in comparison to everyone else down in the south, and B, the British completely underestimated them, sent basically like their worst troops. They didn't care. It wasn't something they gave a shit about. They thought that like they'd be able to just easily best them, and they underestimated them. Once the British took them seriously, the Zulus got crushed. Shaka Zulu was dead by then. He was assassinated by his brothers, I think. It was either brothers or generals, I can't remember. Yeah, he was assassinated, just like Julius Caesar was. But yeah, that's about what I know about Shaka Zulu. Julius Caesar committed genocide is probably something a lot of people don't know about him. If you look up the Gallic Wars, the amount of people he murdered, the amount of people he killed is staggering. I can't remember Gallic Wars. Yeah, don't judge my spelling. Gallic Wars. How many people died? There's punitive death toll. No, where's the enslaved? How many killed? Yeah. How did the Gallic Wars end? No. Sorry. Strength, casualties, Plutarch, 100,000. Yeah. Plutarch, I'm an opinion. 1 million Celts were killed in hand-to-hand combat. 1 million plus were enslaved, and 430,000 were killed by Julius Caesar. From what I understand, Gaul at the time only had like a couple million, not even. I think it was 2 million or something. Like in total, and he enslaved like most of them. He enslaved or murdered most of them. Yeah, that's the other video. So he did commit a genocide. Just a lot of people don't talk about it. There's a lot of genocides throughout history that we don't talk about. That's how a lot of countries expanded, especially older countries. That's the only way to realistically spread your culture anywhere, by wiping out the other culture. Assimilation is hard. It takes a long time. So if you do want your culture to be, like, widespread, genocide is factually the only way to do it. Of course, it's horrific, and it should never be done, but, you know. So, that's how I'm going to start this video. 4 minutes before I even started it. Yeah, this is going to be a rambly one. I'm just going to talk about whatever the hell I want to talk about. If you don't like my rambles, I don't know what to tell you. It's going to happen anyway. Let's go. But it's, as you can see here, it's going to be constant. I'm going to constantly be pausing, turning it off, talking about things. So if you really don't like that, I'd suggest going somewhere else. Shaka Zulu.
He's a commander. Thinks he can dance with Conan of the savannah. But when I go hand to hand with you, I go hammer. Knock off his stone, wrap it up in his own banner. Send it back to Rome with a message from the Zulu.
Yeah. Sorry. Cleopatra, obviously, one of his lovers, and I think the Egyptian pharaoh at one point. It's how Egypt joined Rome. It's because he was fucking her, managed to get them to. I can't remember the exact way, but that's how Egypt ended up joining Rome, because of first Julius Caesar, then Mark Antony, and then after Mark Antony and Cleopatra died, Egypt got absorbed into the Roman Empire under Augustus, which Augustus was Julius Caesar's nephew, or is it adopted nephew or nephew? I can't remember. I think it was adopted nephew. But yeah. If Julius Caesar actually went south of the Sahara, which first off, traveling south of the Sahara during any times if you weren't a Berber clan, God help you, because it is just a big fuck off desert. So yes, if he did go into sub-Saharan Africa without like using the boats going along either the western coast or the eastern coast, and he tried to travel through the Sahara, him and the Romans would have a very rough time. There's a reason historically that didn't happen for any empire up until the modern age in like the 1800s and 1900s, because the Sahara is a giant fuck off desert. And trying to cross a giant fuck-off desert with an army is a good way to lose that army. Unless, of course, you are the Mongols, but the Mongols don't care about petty things like reality. But if he did actually go down and face Shaka face-to-face with his armies, Shaka would get crushed. Julius Caesar was a military genius for his time, and just with the infrastructure and everything else like that, and the metallurgy and everything else like that, Shaka wouldn't have a good time. Again, as I said, the only reason Shaka did so well is because the area around him was super primitive, and he was using basic techniques, and because the British completely underestimated him. Let's go on to Julius Caesar.
You talk a lot of shit for a man wearing a diaper. I heard you had poison spit. Where was it in this cipher? Because all I hear is threats from a brute with no discipline.
Cipher is, again, from my limited understanding, is like code, like cipher code. Like that's how the Romans would spread messages. A lot of the messages would be coded, from what I understand. Again.
And I'm ruling over you like a boot full of my citizens. And you should take your cowskin shield and hide under it. You're fucking with the most triumphant third of the triumvirate.
Triumvirate, yes. He beat back the other members of the triumvirate. I think it was Pompey the Great, and that really rich guy. Was it Crassus? Was that his name? I think it was Crassus. Crassus, however you pronounce his name. I believe that was a triumvirate, if I'm not mistaken. No, not triumvirate. I don't care. Triumvirate. First triumvirate. No, stop it. Stop it. You're hurting my feelings. First triumvirate. Yeah. Between the alliance of Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus. Yeah. Crassus was a really rich man. He was also an asshole. Pompey, considering the fact that we got pompous from his name, you can kind of assume the type of person he was. He named himself the Great. He was that kind of guy. And then Julius Caesar. You know, Julius Caesar, the guy who basically tore down the Roman Republic and in all but name named himself emperor. His nephew ended up naming himself I think it was first consul. Like realistically, like none of the emperors are ever really emperors, at least until the Byzantines. It was always like first of the Senate type of thing, because it's like, oh, the Senate still technically has power, but yeah. So for a long time throughout Roman history, it was like a charade that the Senate still had power. First of the
First to the empire and last of the Republicans, and hunting you accompanied by legions of my country. Oh, ask my kidnappers if I'm just a shit talker, doc.
Now, the kidnapping, from what I understand, he got kidnapped by Adriatic pirates, I believe, in Adriatic Sea, which is eastern Italy, like the little stretch of sea that goes down in between the Balkans and Italy. He got captured by them, I do believe, Once he broke free, he used his power to go back and basically murdered and crucified every one of them. So that's what that's in reference to. He took no prisoners once he escaped. They tried to ransom him back for money. I can't remember if he got ransomed back for money or escaped. I can't remember, but I do know he came back and utterly destroyed them. Because Julius Caesar is a very ruthless man.
J-Dunk on it like boom shakalaka. So don't go rattling your sticks at me. If I wanted to shake spears, I'd waggle my biography.
I heard of your play. Tell me, how does...
Yeah, the William Shakespeare. Everybody knows the William Shakespeare. Everybody was forced to read William Shakespeare at one point or another. And unfortunately, high school kind of ruined Shakespeare for a lot. Middle school and high school ruined Shakespeare for a lot of people. Even though Shakespeare is great, especially in play form, but reading Shakespeare ruined Shakespeare.
Oh yes, you get
Stabbed many times by your friend. He does, but Shaka got stabbed by, I think it was stabbed or poisoned by his brother, so he doesn't really have much room to talk. Although Julius is more famous because he did get murdered by most of the Senate.
What you gonna do with your Roman sword? With the lines of your legion, get gored by the horns of the Zulu.
Again, this is what I brought up in the beginning. The Romans would crush them. They fought people similar to the Zulus and the Celts. Although the Celts were also tended to be naked and tended to use not super advanced weaponry. Although they had slightly more advanced weaponry than the Zulus. Yeah, the Romans would utterly crush them in military combat. Maybe not late Rome, because late Rome was kind of garbage. But underneath Julius Caesar, there are very few forces that don't have like gunpowder, and that aren't the Mongols, that could really stand up to Julius Caesar's legions. There are very few that could actually stand up to Rome at its height. Of course, obviously, like a 17th, 18th century army would probably be able to best it because of gunpowder. And gunpowder broke the rules of war and created a new one. But yeah, anything apart from that, like a medieval army would get crushed by Julius Caesar. Like the Romans at their height are ridiculous.
To dismember any emperor's pasty white horn. I got the strength of a lion and the speed of a cheetah. And everyone knows you're just a chicken, Caesar.
And I be a hyena, cause I'm going to laugh. I'll pave roads with the bones of your goat-herding ass. Where's my front line? I'll look back and spit.
He even goes into it here, yeah. He talks about how, like, no, there's no way. Now, it seems like I'm shitting on the Zulus. I really have no hate for the Zulus. It's just, I happen to know more about the Romans. And two, they were just more advanced, and that's just how history works. If a more advanced nation fights against a less advanced nation, so long as the most advanced nation doesn't completely pretend they don't matter, the less advanced one will get crushed. That's just how history works. But of course, the underdog can win, as we saw the Zulus against the British, because the British just didn't care, and then the Zulus managed to beat them. But that was more of the exception that proved the rule than the rule. But, of course, it sounds like I'm shitting on Shaka here. Shaka, for his area, was a genius. Shaka made what was, like, basically hunter-gatherer tribes with... Well, that's not true. Herders. He made herders into, like, an actual... He was trying to take herders into an actual nation-state. Like, he was trying to, like, centralize them and everything else like that. I think if the British weren't down in that area... that, like, the southwestern tribes would have been able to centralize and would have been able to form up a civilization. It would have taken a couple hundred more years, but that was, like, the start of them actually forging a civilization for themselves. The British happened to be there and completely screwed that, but if that would have happened in, like, 1300, 1400, by the time the British got there, they still would have been conquered like the Indian subcontinent was, but they wouldn't have lost most of their culture. Like, they would have had a nation state that would have been able to, at least for a little bit, fight off the British, because it would have been the British. Because the Dutch wouldn't have been able to, and the Portuguese didn't care. So they would have been able to fight off the British, and they probably would have ended up getting conquered similar to the way that the Indians got conquered, which is less conquered and more, like, had their leaders like had different rebel leaders put in control of different areas, or like other things like that, like they did in India, and then have those leaders be puppets, and then after the government got tired of using those puppets, then the British would take over fully. But yeah, so they would have been able to do it. They just started too late. Shaka came too late, and the growth of that area, which it probably would have developed into an actual society. Not that what they had before wasn't a society, but you know what I mean, like an actual like nation state with cities and things like that. They would have been able to do it. They just came too late. Now, let's get back to Julius Caesar talking about how he's going to utterly crush the Zulus.
Speed of a cheetah, and everyone knows you're just a chicken Caesar, and I be a hyena.
Chicken Caesar or pizza, obviously.
Cause I'm going to laugh, pave roads with the bones of
your
your
cutting out.
Crush my front lines, I'll drop back and spank you in the chest, and I'll decimate your horn. You can't outflank the best. Let your reserves come at me, my ballista's cocked at when I take, I'll always keep my whole crew. Cause there's no use in murdering you and your heathen. You can grow my wheat for me after you're beaten.
That's another thing, yes. The Romans were very much slave-driven. The Zulus also had slaves, but not to the extent. But yeah, the Romans were very slave-driven, so if they battled, yeah, the Zulus would have been enslaved. And the Romans were equal opportunity slavers. They enslaved, like, there was no color bias there. They enslaved everyone and anything, just because they had the power to. So, yeah, there's a ancient history is filled with horrific empires and things like that, and things like, look up the Assyrians if you want to know how bad an ancient society can really be. The Assyrians were horrific. I might do a video on them. The Assyrians were fucking horrific. Honestly, the Persians were probably the best empire. At least the nicest empire that the world had seen in ancient history, at least, because they actually treated other religions kindly. They still had slavery, but they treated other religions kindly. They treated other cultures kindly. They treated like different government structures kindly. As long as you paid taxes and didn't rebel and agreed that the King of Kings was good, they pretty much left you alone. But yeah, the Assyrians were pretty bad. I'll do a video on them as well. So yeah, fortunately, slavery is a very common part of human history. But yeah. Anyway, that's it for me for this video. Who won? Julius Caesar. I'm a Roman freak. Yeah, Julius Caesar won. Yeah, that's about it for me. If you like this particular reaction video for me, I guess like and subscribe and everything else like that down there. Go like, subscribe, and everything else like that with ERB. That deserve all the love, happiness, everything else like that. I have a Twitch if you want to stop by. And yeah, that's it. Love, butts, and happiness, and everything else like that. I'll see you in the next one. I'm gonna do this video later today, probably. Bye. Bye for now. I have a cat down there.